Hello, students and instructors. My name is Nate with Wi-Fi CFI, and for today's little quick tip video here, I want to give some tips on how to pass your CFI Checkride. I've been getting this question a lot lately from students all across the country. I'm not sure what the big influx is, but everybody's starting to ask, what do you suggest are the best ways to prepare for, be organized, and pass that very daunting CFI Checkride? So we've got 7 different tips for you today. I'm going to go through 7 pretty quick tips and explain how we have had such success with this CFI ride. All right, first thing is to know your stuff. Now, I know that sounds self-explanatory. I know that sounds like, oh, duh, I'm supposed to know stuff. But it might be a little bit more complicated than that, and I get this question quite a bit. Basically, people come to me and they say, hey, I'm looking at this CFI ACS. I see all these things I'm supposed to know. Am I supposed to have everything memorized for this CFI Checkride? And this is what I like to tell students. Do you need to have everything in aviation memorized? The answer to that question is no. Okay, you do not need to have every single detail of every single aspect of flight training memorized. But you need to know where to find the correct answer if you don't have it off the top of your head. If you don't know it off the top of your head and can explain it well, you need to be able to find it quickly and efficiently in an FAA-approved source. Okay? I say you need to have the basics for sure memorized. More than just the basics, but absolutely for sure, basic things. You were talking VFR weather rims, we're talking tomato flames, we're talking all of that different stuff. These are things that you do have to have memorized, right? Some of the obscure stuff you don't necessarily need to have memorized, but you need to know where to find it. So I always tell my students, have at least 90% memorized, ready to go. 90% of the questions that you think you're going to get on your DP, on your check ride from your DPE, or maybe you're doing a mock check ride with an examiner or another flight instructor or somebody at your flight school, something like that. You want to have at least 90% of the things up here ready to go. That shows that you're prepared and that you have the knowledge and that you can explain it. The other 10% of things, if you don't know right off the top of your head, know where to find it in an FAA-approved source. That's huge. It's got to be in an FAA-approved source. You can't just be like, well, I Googled it, and this is what Google says. That's not how it works. And for the vast majority of the CFI initial check ride, these are the books you're going to be using. These are the FAA publications that are going to hold the vast majority of the answers. You got the FAR-AIM, the PHAC, which is the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, the Airplane Flying Handbook, some advisory circulars, and your POH, your airplane's POH AFM. If you've got those things and you know what's in each one of those different things, you will be able to find the answer to almost any question you're going to get asked on your check ride. Again, that's the FAR-AIM, the PHAC, the Airplane Flying Handbook, advisory circular, and the POH. All right. And you might be asking yourself, well, I'm supposed to know 90% of the information that's going to be on this check ride. All right? I'm supposed to have 90% of it off the top of my head. Well, where do I even start? How do I even know what information I'm supposed to know? You're in luck. We've got just the thing for you right here on WiFiCFI.com. You come right down here. The very top, this is our homepage here. At the very top, you got study courses. You come down, we have an entire study course just for the CFI. So you want to come, boom, pop right into here. And I'm going to show you we're not going to get into this. We have tutorial videos and everything else. But this is what you want to know on your check ride. All of these things. You got risk management lessons over here. We've got 5 different risk management lessons you want to go through. You want to know all of this stuff. Fundamentals of instruction. We got 6 different lessons you want to go through. You want to know all these things. Ground school lessons. We've got 24. You want to go through and know all these things that are in all of these lessons. Flight maneuvers, so on and so forth. There's 37 flight maneuver lessons. And then we have a bunch of written test prep and check ride prep down here. All right. So if you're curious, what am I supposed to know? It's right here in the CFI study course. So you can go and check that out. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2, let's talk about the fundamentals of instruction because I get a lot of questions on that too. And a little bit of confusion as well. For the fundamentals of instruction, and you can see right here in our CFI study course, we've got a whole section dedicated to the fundamentals of instruction, the FOIs. What a lot of people know and hear is that they're going to have lesson plans and teach their examiner on their Checkride, and that is true. That is 100% true. There will be a lot of lesson plans, and you're going to need to be able to present the information in those lesson plans to your DPE. However, when it comes to the FOIs, it is unlikely that you're going to be teaching the fundamentals of instruction to your Checkride examiner. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not likely. So they're not going to sit down. For example, the examiner is probably not going to sit down and say, present your lesson plan on effective teaching in a professional environment. This FOI right here. That's not really how this part of the Checkride goes. All right. Now, we do have lesson plans for all of these things in our CFI lesson plans course. So down here, if you want Checkride lesson plans, they're right here. We've got lesson plans on all the FOIs. PowerPoint, PDF, Word document format, they're there. Right here. Area of Operation 1, Fundamentals of Instruction, you can pop in and have the lesson plan. But are you really going to be teaching this? It is more likely that what's going to happen for this part of the Checkride is going to be more like your commercial, private, and instrument Checkrides, where the DPE is giving you a scenario with a student. He's going to say, hey, I'm a student and I'm presenting this. I'm acting this way. I'm doing this in flight. I'm not listening to you, whatever, so on and so forth. They're going to give you scenarios and they want to see how you would react to those scenarios. And that helps them know, okay, this student or this applicant understands the fundamentals of instruction. So instead of it being teaching based, right, they're not going to be like, teach me your lesson on effects of human behavior and communication. They're going to give you scenarios and they're going to quiz you on the fundamentals of instruction by giving you scenarios. So you do need to have all this information in your head, but really are you going to be teaching these lesson plans? Probably not. They're great to study so that you do have the information, but teaching, most likely not. Okay, let's jump into the rest of the lesson plans that are over here, because this is the big thing, right? About getting ready for the CFI Checkride. This is the hardest thing to prepare for, is the lesson plans. Because there are so many lesson plans, and you don't always know in advance, before your Checkride, what lesson plans you're going to need to teach during that Checkride. You'll usually find out on the Checkride what you need to teach. So essentially, you need to have lesson plans for all of these things, and there's tons and tons and tons. You can see all these sections right here. Tons and tons and tons of lesson plans that you could be asked to present. All right. Now, some are mandatory and some are optional, right? But there's very few mandatory lesson plans that you need to teach on your Checkride. All right, like runway incursion avoidance, that's one of them. But then it's kind of open after that. And they could choose any of these things. I mean, these are big lesson plans in these technical subject areas. Okay? And there's 15 of them. And then you jump down into pre-flight preparation, and there's some of these here too. You're most likely going to be teaching lessons from Area of Operation 2, 3, and then one of the flight maneuvers. That's typically how it goes. You usually get 1 or 2 lessons you got to teach from Area of Operation 2, maybe 1 lesson from Area of Operation 3, and then they'll pick a flight maneuver or 2 that they want you to teach on the ground as well. Now, we've got all these here on WiFiCFI.com. Do you need to use these? No. You basically have 2 options when it comes to the lesson plans for the Checkride. First, you can create your own lesson plans. And there's pros and cons to this. All right. The pro of creating your own lesson plans from scratch is that you know exactly what is in those lesson plans because you put them together. You bake the cake, right? So you know what the ingredients are that are in the cake. And what's really good about that is then when you teach them on your Checkride, you're already familiar with them, and there's not going to be anything that pops up in the lesson plan that surprises you, because that's the last thing you want. You do not want to be teaching a lesson plan on your Checkride to your DPE, right? And something pops up and you're like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that is. I haven't seen this before. That is a recipe for disaster. So that is the pro to creating your own lesson plans, is you know everything that's in there, and it's fantastic, right? You can present them very well because you created them. However, the cons are it takes a lot of time, especially to make good ones. It takes a lot of time. We spend hundreds of hours of every year just keeping these up to date. Creating them from scratch took many, many, many hours, right? And again, we still spend hours and hours every month updating and changing and improving things in these. So it is a significant time investment. The second real con that I've seen with creating your own lesson plans is that you've never taken this Checkride before. You're new to it, right? And so, and you probably haven't had that much experience teaching like aviation lessons to real life students. All right. So if you're coming in and you want to creating these things from scratch, again, that's great. It can take a lot of time, but also you don't have a lot of experience in teaching the lesson plans. Is this the best flow? Should I be bringing this up yet? And how much detail should I go into with this particular topic? Or am I getting way off into the weeds, right? And when you haven't actually done this Checkride before or taught a lot of aviation students, that can be really hard to know when to stop, when to turn the water off, when to turn the water on, okay? So those are the pros and cons. Now, purchasing commercial lesson plans, again, like we have, and I don't want to sound biased here, but I'm going to give you the pros and cons of purchasing commercial lesson plans because they are totally fine to use on your Checkride as well. I get this question a lot. Can I use these on my Checkride? Absolutely. There is no rule. There never has been a rule that says you need to create your own lesson plans. It says you need to teach with lesson plans, present them. Nowhere does it say or ever has said that you need to create them from scratch. You can use commercially purchased lesson plans on your Checkride. 100%. That is fine. In any situation, in any CFI Checkride, they cannot come up to you and say, you can't do that. You absolutely can do that. Okay. The pros to it, you're going to save a whole bunch of time. These are already built. Okay. You're going to save a whole bunch of time. The other pro, right, is that this has been done. These are lesson plans that have been created by flight instructors that, again, we've been flight instructing. I mean, our combined experience here is like 80 years of flight instruction combining all of our experience. Okay. We've done it quite a bit, and we've gone through these lesson plans over and over and over and over and over again, okay, to try to make them just right and easy for you guys to use and teach with. The bad thing is, the con is that you need to know what is in these lesson plans. Again, you cannot get surprised on your Checkride and be like, oh, I didn't even know this was in here. That is a terrible spot to be in. You never want to be there. So what we suggest, if you want the best of both worlds, this is what we suggest. Get these commercially built lesson plans. They've been built by pros. They were maintained by pros. And it'll save you, again, hundreds of hours of prep time. After you get them, download them. Download them to your device. You can download them to your mobile device or your computer, whatever. Download them. Customize them how you would like. Customize them to your particular airplane that you're going to be using on your Checkride. Customize them to your particular airport. Customize them to your particular airspace where you're going to be flying. Okay? Go through these, customize them, make these small changes here and there to customize them, and then practice teaching each and every one of these lessons at least one time to a friend or another student at the flight school, to a flight instructor, to somebody. Practice teaching every single one of these at least one time. I would suggest more than one time, but definitely at least one time to somebody. That way, when you get to your Checkride, you've saved yourself a whole bunch of time. You have professionally built lesson plans, and you know what's in them. And you're not going to be surprised by anything when you're talking with your DPE. You're not going to get confused by anything or by the flow. You're going to know the flow. You're going to know the content. You're going to be able to deliver it well. And I think that's the best of both worlds. Obviously, I'm being biased. You don't need to take my word for it. Ask around. But, obviously, we sell these. So that's what we think is best. All right. But that's how lesson plans go. You can build them. You can buy them. But if you do buy them, make sure that you customize them and then you practice teaching them for the best results. All right, so that was tip number 3. First, we had know your stuff. Then we talked about the FOIs. Just talked about the lesson plans. Number 4 is endorsements. I get questions about endorsements a lot. Again, endorsements are kind of going to be how, like the fundamentals of instruction. That's how they're kind of going to kind of go on your Checkride. Sorry, that was a tongue twister. It's not going to be like, all right, sit down and teach me a lesson plan on endorsements. That's not how this part of the Checkride's most likely going to go. All right, they're going to say, hey, I'm a student. I come in and I want to do my first solo flight. What endorsements and ground training would I need, ground and flight training would I need to do that, to be eligible to do that solo flight? All right, so it's scenario based. It's not teaching based. They're not going to be like, hey, whip out your plan on endorsements, your lesson plan on endorsements, and teach me every detail about every endorsement. All right, it's going to be scenario based. They'll give you scenarios, and you need to tell them the correct endorsements that the student would need, because remember, you're going to become a CFI. So the privilege of becoming a CFI is that you can give endorsements now. So you need to be able to give them properly. All right. We do have a lesson plan in here on endorsements, but it really just kind of teaches you how the endorsements on Wi-Fi CFI work. All right. Also, at the time of this recording, advisory circular 6165 Juliet is current. Definitely. Now we're going to talk about this in just a little bit, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. But I would have, my personal opinion, I would have this printed out in a physical format and bring that to the Checkride with you. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay. But as far as endorsements go as well, we do have a great endorsement helper right here on WiFiCFI.com. If you scroll down underneath, we've got our study courses up top, right? Checkride lesson plans, teaching courses, and then down here, boom, this first box right here, endorsements. These are completely free for anybody to use. You don't even need to sign up for our website, nothing. These are 100% free. You just come right here, endorsements, and they're all listed out. They're listed on here by category. So you've got student pilot endorsements, private pilot, instrument, commercial, flight instructor, some additional endorsements, and then we got some logbook audits and CFI record keeping, all right here on this page. So let's take our example. Checkride examiner says, what endorsements would a student need to do their first solo? Student pilot, first student solo, you click right here. It's going to pop up. Here they are, A3, A4, A6. You can just put the student's name right there, put the make and model of the aircraft, signature, date, your recent experience date, your CFI number. Underneath the endorsements that you need, we have endorsement notes, so you can read about it. So A3 is aircraft type specific, so on and so forth. A4 is aircraft type specific. A6 is also aircraft type specific, and it's got other notes on these things. Then you would scroll down here. Here's what they need to have learned in flight before they can go do this first solo flight. And you need to have taught them these things and signed them off. This is straight from the FARs. We've just turned it into a chart that you can date and sign, lesson time, location, all that. You can print this out, keep it in a separate logbook, or the student can fold it up and tape it in their logbook, however you want to do it. Okay? Right there. And then you could say, hey, what if we have a private pilot and he's already got his airplane single engine land, but he wants to add airplane multi-engine land to his airplane single engine land license? All right, great question. Private pilot, is it airplane single engine land? Nope. We're looking for AMEL, airplane multi-engine land. And is it an initial check ride or an add-on? It's an add-on, right? Because they already have private pilot single. So you come down here, AMEL add-on, click that, boom, here's the endorsements, the notes, the ground and flight training records right here. Now, caveat with this, all right? Here's a lot, like I said, here's a whole bunch of different scenarios right here for you and endorsements. I would definitely suggest spending some time here, just kind of getting used to the flow and reading the notes that we've put on these things. But the caveat is Wi-Fi CFI is not an FAA published source, right? We were not created by the FAA, right? So that's why we would suggest having the latest advisory circular for endorsements in paper on your Checkride. So that if they ask you a question and, I don't know, maybe you come over here or whatever, but make sure that you also use that advisory circular, because that one is from the FAA and that one is FAA approved. All right. Our endorsements, we always keep them up to date. Anytime the advisory circular changes, we change our endorsements immediately and update them. All right. But again, we're not we're not an FAA source. So that's why it's very important to also have this advisory circular handy. At the time of this recording, the advisory circular is 6165 Juliet. That can change, and it has changed. We're up to Juliet, right? It's changed quite a few times actually over the last couple of years, so make sure you have the most up-to-date one. Don't be jumping in to the Checkride with an out-of-date advisory circular here. All right, it's got to be the correct and up-to-date one. All right, that's endorsements. Again, it's not really a teaching lesson. It is scenario-based, and they'll ask you different scenarios. Tip number 5, what should we bring to the Checkride? These are some suggestions that I have. We've got a Checkride checklist, and I'll show you. It's right over here. We can pop down. It's in the CFI study course. Come down here, FAA Checkride Prep. We do have a Checkride checklist right here. And on this Checkride checklist, you can print this out. I suggest printing it out and then going through it with your flight instructor to make sure that you have everything you need for the Checkride, right? But it's going to have logbook audits, make sure you've got a flight plan and airworthiness checklist, you've got your weight and balance done, your airplane scheduled for the Checkride, all these different things. It even has student documents to bring, driver's licenses, you got to bring your written test, all this stuff, right? Great stuff, examiner's fee, because you don't want to show up and not have one of these things done, because then you're going to be starting your Checkride off on the wrong foot. It's like you're already not organized, you're already disorganized, not everything's ready to go and present to the Checkride examiner. They already have a bad taste in their mouth, and I promise the rest of the Checkride is going to be more difficult. I've always told my students this, the easier the check-in process is for the DPE, the better your Checkride is going to go, 100%. Make it so easy, make it so organized that the DPE can just come in, check, 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 logbook looks good, let's get it. It should be so easy. Don't be forgetting things. Don't have papers scattered all across the room. Have it in a binder, have it ready to go. Say, hey, he or she asked for something, boom, here it is. Here's my written test. Let's see your weight and balance calculations. Boom, here they are. Here's my weight and balance calculations. And this basically goes through everything. However, for the CFI Checkride, in addition to having the things that are on this Checkride Ready checklist here, I would also suggest you've also got to have your lesson plans, right? Now, the lesson plans don't need to be printed off per se, but you do need to have some access to them. They can be digital, right? Actually, printing them off is kind of crazy. Our CFI lesson plans have over 2,100 PowerPoint slides. That's just in the CFI. That doesn't include the CFII or the MEI. So 2,100. If you're going to print that document out, that's a 2,100 page document. And there's a lot of colors and there's a lot of diagrams. So some students do elect to do that. It's huge. That's fine. But you don't need to have them printed. There's also, like I was saying earlier, how there's no rule that you need to create them on your own. There's also no rule that it necessarily says you have to have them printed. All right. They can be in digital format. That's fine. But have them ready to go, whether they're digital or physical. So in addition to all this stuff, we got to have our lesson plans. And then make sure that you have those things, the books that we kind of talked about at the beginning, right? Because if you don't know something, the 10% of things you don't know, you need to be able to look up. I would probably personally, I would have these in physical format, these publications, but you don't need to. You could have them in digital format too. But you're going to want the FAR-AM. Because if you get asked a question that's regulatory in nature, hey, what's the oxygen use requirement at 14,500 feet? That's one you should probably actually have memorized. That's just an example that came to my head. But it's a regulation, boom, you're going into the FAR-AM. Okay? PHAC. If it's ground school stuff, you're going to be looking in the PHAC. All right? If they're asking about weather theory, weather reports, whatever, PHAC. There we go. Now you know where to look, find those things. The airplane flying handbook is the third one you're going to want to have. If they're asking a question about a maneuver, hey, how do we do chandelles? What should be our approximate bank and pitch? Airplane flying handbook. That's where that's going to be. If it's a maneuver that you fly in the airplane, look in the airplane flying handbook. Advisory circulars, like we talked about, especially the advisory circular for endorsements. There are other good advisory circulars out there, such as the ones for inoperative equipment, MELs, stuff like that. You could have those if you wanted to, but definitely have the endorsements one. Okay, and then your POH or your AFM for your airplane. You're definitely going to want that, because if they ask you a question that's specific to your aircraft, that's where you're going to find that information. Okay, so let's just go over this one more time. Things you want to bring to the check ride. Everything that's on this list right here. You're then going to want to have your lesson plans, the FAR aim, PHAC, airplane flying handbook, endorsement advisory circular, and the POH for the airplane. There you go. And that should cover basically everything. Unless you get way off into the weeds on accident, for the most part, in those publications, you should be able to find any question that's relevant to the CFI Checkride. Right. Number 6, our 6th tip here is just tips for ground, for doing the ground portion of the check ride. Be on time, don't be late, and don't be disorganized. Be on time, be professional, be cleaned up, haircut, smelling good, wearing your good clothes, right? Ready to go, the whole jazz. And then the second thing I always tell my students, in addition to being professional, is be confident. Be confident on this check ride. You are the aviation professional now, or at least that's what you're testing to become, right? You're testing to become the professional that students rely on to live through their aviation training and to learn through their aviation training. You're that guy or that girl. So you need to be confident on the check ride. And this can kind of slip by the wayside sometimes, because a lot of times when it's your first time doing this check ride, you're very nervous and you don't necessarily feel that confident, right? Because you've never done this before, and it's totally understandable that you might not feel confident, but act confident. Act confident, not cocky. Don't be cocky. Be humble, but confident throughout the entire check ride. An example of this is I've had students before that have gone into check rides, super smart students. They know their stuff, but they don't act confident when they answer the questions or when they deliver the lesson. When the examiner asks them a question, they answer it like a question. For instance, what are the VFR day flight requirements, airworthiness requirements? You could say it's 8 tomato flames. Let's go ahead and go through that list with you and start going through 8 tomato flames. Or you could say it not confidently and be like, 8 tomato flames? Yeah? Okay, those are both the right answer. I said 8 tomato flames both times. They're both the correct answer. But which one sounds like I know what I'm talking about and that I'm the professional? Right? What are the VFR day requirements? 8 tomato flames. That's the common acronym that goes around aviation. Let's go ahead and sit down and look at it and compare it to our airplane. Or, 8 tomato flames. 8 tomato flames. That's the one. There's a huge difference between those things. You're going to distill a lot of confidence in your DPE if you act confident. And if you act confident long enough, you will feel confident. All right, so act confident, be confident, answer and teach confidently. Don't put a question mark at the end of every sentence. I see nervous students do that. They answer every question and it sounds like there's a hidden question mark at the end of their answer. Don't do that. Deliver the answer. All right. If you are wrong, you're wrong. Be humble. Accept that you're wrong. Accept the criticism and move on. And then continue to be confident again. Remember, not cocky though. Don't walk in like I know everything. Bow to me. Because that, trust me, that's not going to go over well on the check ride. At all. Okay. And not only on the check ride, that's not going to go over well in real life. All your students are going to hate you. Don't be that instructor. We've all met and seen and been around those instructors. They're old news, right? That's an in the past thing. Cocky instructors, go away. We don't need those guys anymore. Confident, humble, professional instructors, that's what we need. Not the cocky guys that think they're so great and we all need to bow to them. Number 7, tips for the flight. I get this question a lot too. How's the flight going to go? And I get some kind of weird misconceptions about this, where students will be like, oh, well, I just sit there and teach the whole time and the examiner flies the entire flight and I just sit there and teach them. I don't know where those rumors start or why they keep perpetuating, but most likely that's not how it's going to go. The examiner may take over and do 1 or 2 maneuvers and have you teach them for 1 or 2 flight maneuvers, but the whole flight, highly doubtful. Highly doubtful. So how the flight goes is you need to be able to perform the flight maneuvers. Again, the flight maneuvers that we've got, here's all the flight maneuvers on the CFI Checkride. I'll pop back in here and show them to you again. Flight maneuver section. So we got basically 37 different things in the flight maneuvers. We got traffic patterns, normal takeoff and climbs, go rounds, the stalls, emergency stuff, spins, chandelles, lazy eights on pylons. Yeah, all that. Ground reference maneuvers, unusual attitudes. Okay. So you want to know how to fly all of these to the ACS standards while simultaneously teaching them. Teach them while you fly them. That's what you need to be able to do to pass this check ride, right? And to have, to pass the flight portion of the check ride. So this is what I've always told my students. Let's take steep turns, for example. All right, this is probably the easiest example. When you go up in flight and you're going to do steep turns, you're going to be teaching it while you're flying it to the ACS standards. When I say teaching, I basically just mean talking. Talk. The worst thing you can do on the flight is stop talking and go quiet. On the flight, you should be talk. You should be talking the entire flight. The entire flight. Your mouth should be so dry at the end of this flight that you got to guzzle a whole gallon of water. Talk. If your hand is doing something, if one of your hands is doing something in the airplane, say it out loud. So let's take steep turns, for example. All right, we're going to go ahead and do a 90-degree clearing turn to the left. We're going to look for traffic up and down below us and around us. We're going to do a 90-degree clearing turn back to the right. Now I'm going to go ahead and pick out my outside visual reference. I'm going to smoothly roll into a 50-degree bank to the left. As I'm rolling, you can see I'm adding this bank. We're rolling over. I'm going to add some power, and I'm going to add some back trim to help maintain my altitude and my airspeed as I go throughout. And I'm going to adjust that as we complete this full turn. There you go. It's not that complicated, really. You're just telling the instructor what your hands are doing. If your hands or feet are doing something, say it out loud. The other point I want to make with this is if you're doing these steep turns, we're not getting into advanced aerodynamics in the airplane. Okay, we're not talking about the change in vertical lift, the horizontal component of lift, and centrifugal force and drag. You're not teaching that in the plane. That would be something that you teach on the ground. You would teach all those things about steep turns, sure. You teach those things on the ground. You're not teaching advanced aerodynamics while you're flying steep turns. All right. Even if you tried that in real life, are you kidding me? Students can barely fly steep turns without you saying anything to them. You think that they're going to be able to fly steep turns and also learn aerodynamics simultaneously. No, you're not doing that, okay? It's useless. You're wasting your breath. But they do need to know what they need to be doing with their hands and feet. So that's it. When I say teaching on the flight, just talk. Talk. And just verbalize what your hands or feet are doing. And that's good. That's what teaching is. Cool? Got that? Don't be jumping into advanced aerodynamics, though. That's again, that is a ground school topic. And on your check ride, you will be asked to teach a flight maneuver on the ground before you even go fly. So if they said, hey, I want you to teach me steep turns on the ground before we go, yeah, that's where you're going to talk about horizontal lift component, maintaining coordination, overbanking tendencies. You'll be talking all about that stuff on the ground. Once you get into the flight, boom, that stuff is gone. Now we're just talking about what our hands and feet are doing. And those are the 7 big tips that we have noticed that have really helped our students show up confident, prepared, and had the most success on this very difficult check ride. If you guys have any questions about any of this stuff, or if you have more tips, please let us know. We'll update this video regularly and we'll add your guys' awesome tips as well. Thanks for studying with us. We'll see you guys soon.